welcome to episode 45 of the Slow Crafting Podcast. Today I'm going to speak to you about creating a historically inspired fancy dress outfit for my youngest daughter using primarily leftover and scrap fabric from my stash, with a view to it being slightly more sustainable than the usual man-made fibre fancy dress outfits that you can buy from shops. Okay, I hope you enjoy it. Okay, so this is the outfit that I made for my youngest daughter when she said she wanted a wedding dress for her birthday. It consists of a dress, a velvet cape and a sort of tiara fascinator thing for her hair. Most of this was made from stash. I think there's only maybe one bit of ribbon, the base for the tiara and a bit of fabric on the back that I bought. Everything else was either deep stash given to me by somebody else or leftovers from a dress that I made for me, and again that was leftovers from another dress I made for me. Okay, so we'll start with the cape. I think there should be pictures of this being worn inserted. Probably I'll put them at the beginning and at the end. So as you can see, it's a circle of velvet that's had a smaller circle at the neck cut out. So yeah, I measured the neckline and cut a big circle out based on the size. Yeah, the neckline was measurements we used for cutting the smaller circle out at the top, and basically the size of the material dictated how big the outer circle was going to be. And then I cut up the front to make the opening and lined it with some white fabric that was actually curtain lining, and then I used bias binding on the edges just to neaten it up. I made a self-drafted Nehru or Mandarin collar to go at the top, which I did in the velvet lined with the white fabric, and then another inner lining made from the same blue floral fabric as the dress, and then I added the trim and some embroidery and some ribbon roses on the outside. I made trim ruffles to go at the bottom with the matching dress fabric, the blue floral. I had some okay, my storage was full, so I'll start again. The blue ribbon was some that I'd had in stash for quite a while. I do have a tendency to pick up little bits of ribbon and lace when I see them in bargain sections in places. The roses or flowers I made using offcuts of ribbon, again that I had in stash. The ribbon tie I had in stash. The trim, which there's a lot more of on the dress, I made. Now, when my daughter said she wanted a wedding dress, we'd been watching some podcasts by Angela Clayton when she was making a robe à la Parisienne. I'll probably put something across the screen. And she was making some trim for that, so I followed the instructions that she used for making her trim, and it was really addictive. I could have carried on making trim forever, I think. I have a desire to make trim for all my own outfits now. And then I used some variegated green embroidery floss just to make a pattern to look a bit like leaves, or yeah, to tie in with the floral print, and just to anchor the velvet to the lining underneath. So yes, that's the cape. The tiara, just move that out of the way. I bought the plastic tiara base just from the local pound shop actually, which isn't ideal, but I didn't have anything in stash that would have worked. Or probably if I'd have gone in the garden shed, I could have found some gardening wire or something that could have been used to make a headdress, but it wouldn't have been quite a tiara. So I used some more of the trim, and I just sewed it to the tiara frame. I cut some more of the blue floral fabric. I made some more ribbon flowers, and the rose cluster here and the pearl spikes here were actually in a collection of trims and knickknacks that I had from when I was at university. Every year we'd have a formal ball, and I'd stick a ridiculous amount of hair grips in my hair covered in flowers or pearls or ribbons of some kind. So these are about somewhere between 18 and 20 years old probably. So they're doing quite well. But I thought I'd add them onto here. You can adjust the pearls. They did look slightly better, but they've been in her hair for a day out, and also knocking about in my handbag for the last day since we got back. So yeah, that's the tiara. Right, the dress. Here we go. So here we are. Oh, if I stand right back, you can get a full view. So as I said, the blue fabric is left over from when I made myself a Dotty Angel frock last year. And then the peachy coloured trim is leftover fabric from when I made myself the metamorphic dress last year as well. I didn't use a pattern as such for the dress. The bodice section I based on a dress that I'd made for Christmas last year, which the pattern for that I'd got out of a book on smocking actually. So the bodice section was out of that because I knew that dress still fitted her and had plenty of room. The skirt section of the dress was just 2 rectangles of fabric, and then I followed a tutorial online for drafting sleeve patterns. So I measured her top of her arm, the length of her arm, the circumference of her round her just after her elbow and round her wrist. So these are 3/4 length sleeves, and the dress comes sort of just below her knee. And then when I was attaching the front, I just did a big, I don't know, does this count as a box pleat? I'm not very good at my technical terminology, but it's a big pleat down the middle, whereas the back section is gathered. And this is lined, it's fully lined with some more of the curtain lining, but I did again 2 rectangles for the inner skirt, and then added on a ruffle underneath just to give the skirt a bit more volume, and then covered the raw edge of that in some bias binding. So the ruffle on this was not quite twice the width of the rectangle for the underskirt, but that was because that was the amount of fabric that I had. Now the hem is you can see with the stitching for the trim as well as on the hem. So the hem I sewed up with herringbone stitch. All the seams are felled and then whip stitched. That's the same for the underskirt as well. So oh, I don't know if you can focus. Oh, get out of the way, frill. So yeah. Oh, and I should have said that this whole dress and the cape and everything was stitched entirely by hand. Not for any reason beyond the fact that I find it a lot less stressful than sewing on a sewing machine, just to get my needle out, and I can do it whenever and whenever without too much of a setup or tidy up. Because I mean, that was one of the things, I was trying to do this in secret so she didn't notice what I was making, so I couldn't have her try it on, nor could I have her see me working on it. So I was very much making the most of every opportunity when they were at school or when they'd gone to bed. So it needed to be something that I could just throw it all in a bag quickly, so I could keep working on it till right the last minute and then go out and pick them up or wake them up or something. Where the skirt joins the bodice, I've just put on a double layer of ribbon, which I whip stitch down at the top, and then just did a running stitch to attach the middle bit of ribbon. Now the sleeves, again, they were stitched by hand and then felled and whip stitched. When I originally gave it to her, the sleeves were a little bit tight around the cuff. Now she could get it on, but there wasn't a massive amount of movement possible when she was wearing it. So I've just slit the seam. Luckily, I thought that might be a possibility, so I'd sewn my trim on in a way that it matched up with the seam of the sleeve, so I could easily unpick sort of the last 1.5 inches of the sleeve and just give it a bit more freedom of movement on both sleeves. Right, the back. Whoop. Let's see, it might be easier to see all this on the pictures of her wearing it. Now, I've not got all my pleats. So I pleated the top section. This bit of fabric is probably, I think, about the only bit that I bought for the dress. It was part of a headscarf that I got from the local market. Now, there was only fancy trim at one end. The rest of it was all sort of that peachy coloured. Don't know quite what type of fabric that is, but it's very sheer, and you can see all the sparkles and beads and things attached to it. So yes, I think I probably used about half of the scarf, so I've got sort of more of that peachy coloured fabric left for making something else with. I pleated the top just to get it to the same width as the neckline, and I attached some more trim at the top of there, and I don't know if you can see, it's fastened with hook and eyes, so it can be, not that I can do it one-handed, but you can detach it in case either she doesn't want to have the train on that day, or it's just easier and she's less likely to damage it if she's sort of playing and what have you. You can just take it off and she can wear sort of a more simplified version of the dress. Oh, I didn't show you on the front. it fastens with 2 snaps or poppers. Oh, so there we go. So as you can see, the inside of the bodice is lined with the white curtain lining fabric as well, and then edges are neatened up or finished with some more bias binding. The sleeves aren't lined. I just did those a single layer of fabric because I wasn't sure that I would be able to get a nice fit with a double layer of fabric. And the inside of the bodice is all sort of honestly, I'm forgetting all technical terms. I've flat felled the seams and whip stitched them, and then I've tucked the edging under for around the sleeves as well and whip stitched that down. So there's no raw edges anywhere on the inside. So I've done bias binding to cover up the seam where the bodice joins the skirt as well. I worked, when I was doing the skirt section, I worked as if the blue piece of fabric and the white piece of fabric were one piece. So I attached them together and pleated them as one piece or gathered them as one piece at the back, but they're not joined at the bottom, so it's open at the bottom. Just so I got all my gathers and my pleats even rather than trying to do them separately. So okay, that's the finished dress. So most of the fabric used in the dress, so the fabric, the blue floral, the peach and the white curtain lining, they're all cotton fabrics. The only man-made fibres I think are in the ribbon and the fabric used for the veil train, and the bits, the plastic base and the ribbons on the tiara, and I think the pale blue ribbon on the cape as well. So to say she wanted a fancy dress for parties and just mooching about in, I think it is comparably quite sustainable in that it's scrap fabric that I already owned. Because I've made it, she will treat it a lot differently to the fancy dress outfits that we've had passed down from various other friends and relatives. And it's something she really loves, and the fabrics involved are a lot less flammable and a lot less plastic than your traditional fancy dress outfits. So I think that's about everything. I know it's a bit of a different video to normal, but hopefully you've enjoyed seeing that. If you've got any questions about the dress or the cape or the tiara or anything else in relation to this particular make, please feel free to ask in the box below. And if not, I shall speak to you in a couple of weeks' time. All right then, thank you, bye-bye.